Hey there, and welcome to the MedSpa Success Strategies podcast. I'm your host, Ricky Shockley, owner of MedSpa Magic Marketing, and this is where MedSpa and aesthetics practice owners come to discover strategies and tactics that help them better market and manage their practices so they can grow, improve profitability, and have greater impact for their teams and their patients. Excited for our first three-peat guest today. Sara Shikhman, managing partner of Lengea Law, joins us today. Sara is an experienced healthcare lawyer, an entrepreneur with over 16 years of experience and expertise. She and her team have assisted more than 1,000 clients in navigating the healthcare industry's complex legal and regulatory landscape, negotiating contracts, protecting intellectual property, and obtaining funding. As CEO and COO, she has also led several multi-million-dollar ventures, including an e-commerce company that generated over $13 million in revenue in 2 years, and a med spa that expanded from 1 room to 12 locations across multiple states, generating over $13 million in annual revenue. Sara is dedicated to helping individuals achieve their goals and dreams one step at a time. Sara, we're really excited to have you back on. You're one of my most quoted guests. I feel like I reference our conversations all the time. You are now our first three-peat guest also. So we've had some guests come on for a second time, but you're our first three-peat guest. So we're excited to have you. I wanted to take a little bit of time to go a little bit deeper on some of the topics that we talked about on our previous episodes. And one of the things I feel like we maybe touched on really lightly was your backstory with your med spa. I know you're in the legal space now. You're helping med spas with all sorts of things all over the country. So I want to talk about that too. But specifically like your backstory when you had your med spa, how did you start and how did you go from 1 room to the scale that you achieved? I kind of wanted to just dig a little bit more on the backstory if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. So my background before I got into the med spa business was I was a corporate attorney, and then a friend of mine recruited me to start an e-commerce company with them, selling furniture online in all 50 states using our own proprietary website. And this was pretty new back in 2008 when we were doing it. People were like, what? Like people buy furniture sight unseen from the internet? And we were like, yeah, we did $12 million in revenue last year. And so using that experience in marketing and running a team, I was speaking to my husband at the time, and he said, well, I'm wanting to open a med spa. I don't really know exactly where to do it or how to do it. Do you want to do the business side of it? And I own this building in downtown Columbus. It's under construction. It's in the middle of not the greatest neighborhood, but I think we have 1 room that we could start with. And so we started with literally 1 semi-finished room. And one of our first clients was actually my ex-boyfriend with his new girlfriend. So I was like, okay, who can we recruit to be like our model patients? Because that's really important, right?
Yeah.
And it was literally my ex-boyfriend.
That's crazy. Yeah, so I know one of the things too, I know that a lot of people, if they don't have the medical background, it's more of a challenge to be successful. Like a lot of the people that start small, they're starting as the provider. So how did you go about like finding your provider at first out of the gate?
Well, our first provider was my husband because he was a doctor.
Okay, got it.
And then our second provider was a registered nurse that he knew from like working in the hospital. So yeah, I agree. I think you need kind of both sides to be really successful, a strong business person or a great business consultant and a great medical provider. If you just have one and not the other, it's super hard.
Yeah, so I hear a lot of people say that if you don't have a medical person and you're just coming in as an outside business person, it's challenging. But I know firsthand from talking to med spa owners, it's also very challenging if you have the medical background and not the business background, because everything feels like a mystery and you don't really know what the path to success even looks like. So
Yeah.
what do you recommend for people that are in one position or the other? So like it's not necessarily a family member, like they're starting as just the business owner, the entrepreneur, they started a med spa, or they're just the medical provider and they have no business background. What is a practical way to try to bridge that gap when you don't necessarily have a partner that fits that role?
Yeah, I would say find a really good business consultant type of person, like a marketing agency or even a solo consultant who can help you on the business side. But be very clear about what you're hiring them for and what their job is versus yours, and do a lot of due diligence, like homework before hiring that person. So, what the goal of that role will be, you could figure all these things out yourself. And maybe it's going to cost you $10,000 in 6 months. But maybe if you hire a very good consultant, it's going to cost you $5,000 and 2 months. So you're just trying to kind of launch smarter, do things faster, and get someone with real experience on your team, because this isn't just like running a medical office. It's like running a retail business and a medical office. So you need somebody strong in those skills too.
Yeah, I love that. And so you started really small still when you started the practice. It grew from there. I know this is one of the things that's in MedSpa Confidential that we talked about previously, and the importance of starting small. But what I notice is there's some people that they come out of the gate and they don't start small. They've got a big SBA loan. They've got a space that's a little too big. They're stressed. They're a little pinched on money. Any advice financially to people starting their med spas? Because I feel like that's something that I know is a really big challenge for a lot of people early on.
Yeah. In my book, MedSpa Confidential, I said you have to start small. I still believe that in every business. Even if you want to start the next Uber or the next Airbnb, the next Amazon, unless you come from a trust fund background and lots of family money, I would say start small. You could always go bigger. You could always take out an SBA loan if they're going to give it to you, but you don't have to use it right away or use it on things that are not sellable. So what I mean is, if you're going to take a average SBA loan for a startup in this space is about 250, 300,000. So let's say you take a $300,000 loan and you spend 50% of it or more on your build out and your machines. It's going to be hard to recoup that investment. I would say take the loan if you really want, but spend a lot of it on marketing and building out your team versus on these assets where once you buy a laser, if you want to sell it 1 month later, you're going to get 40% of it, or maybe 20%, so yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So starting in one room, I think a lot of our listeners, they're probably businesses, med spas that are maybe a little more established. They're maybe doing, I don't know, $100,000, $200,000 in revenue. So real quick, could you talk about how you got from that one room to kind of that point where you were doing $100,000 a month in revenue? And then from there, how did you think about scaling and growing the business beyond one location? Because I know a lot of people, they're in that one location. They feel like maybe the audience is a little bit saturated. They're looking to expand. They think that maybe the next right move is another office. I guess both of those transitions, how did you get from this one room to really an established, successful med spa? And what was the decision behind scaling and growing 2 additional locations?
Yeah, so after we had the one room and that was successful, I had this big connection to New York because that's where I grew up and that's where a lot of my network was. And I said, okay, we're in Columbus, Ohio now, but let's open an office in New York, but also start small. So what we did is our first office, we actually rented another room from a chiropractor. So we literally went on Craigslist, found a bunch of people who were subleasing spaces in their office. And one of these was this nice chiropractor in Midtown. And she gave us, or she rented us one room. She didn't give us anything. She just she let us pay a pretty high rent for this room. And what happened was, soon enough, our portion of the waiting room was so full of patients. She was upset because like her quiet office became this like crazy 90% med spa and 10% chiropractor office. So the next move was, instead of that one room, we, in the same building in New York, because the costs of moving are so high, we found a law office that wanted to move out, and we took over their office. I'm really not into big build outs, and because they extend the time to launch, and B, you're never going to get the money back. Those things become fixtures, meaning once they're attached to the wall, even if it's a beautiful chandelier and cabinets, you can't take it with you. Most leases prohibit that. So you're giving that to the landlord. You're making their space beautiful. So we took over this law firm space, and that had 2 big treatment rooms. And then at the same time, back in Columbus, Ohio, expanded to more rooms in the original building. And then the third location was another location in Columbus, Ohio, just maybe 20, 30 minutes away. So going back, like if I didn't have that New York connection, I would say it's better to have your offices close by so that you don't need to fly from one to the other. We used to spend 7 days a week literally working or traveling on a plane. That was not a good, sustainable thing.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Did all the med spas go by the same name?
Or yes, they all went by the same name.
So shared branding. I think this rule still makes sense. Like growing at the speed of demand, I think is a good general rule of thumb, whether you have one room and you're looking to get an office space that has 2 rooms, or you're doing $3 million a year. Like you grow as demand dictates. So once you feel like the demand is there to grow, you grow. I think a lot of people that I talk to, they think that like opening a second office or doing something is going to make everything better, even if they don't have everything kind of dialed in at their first location. They think like somehow the solution to any of their woes and making the business more profitable is like to jump to a second location. So what do you recommend just in terms of like when there is the right time to think about expanding to multiple locations versus just doubling down on making your one location as successful as you can?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for making your one location as successful as you can. Like right now, I have clients who do $5 million a year from one big location. And that's much easier and better to run than if they had two locations, each making, 2, 3 million. That being said, if the goal was to sell to private equity or something like that, a two location business, a true two location business, not like one location is great, one location sucks.
Yeah,
That's not
satellite
a two
office,
location.
like you got a nice med spa and then the other one's just one room somewhere else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not really a two location business. But if you have the opportunity to grow in your current space, I would say that's much better always, even though it doesn't sound as sexy than opening up a second location. And you could aim to do 2, 3, 4, $5 million a year in a single location, like many people do. And if there's enough space, I would definitely say do that versus spreading yourself to another place. Because what happens is you run into all these new problems, inventory problems, people problems, the people who you got used to you being around and telling them what to do and solving all their issues, right? Then all of a sudden, the lights go off and they're like, oh my God, what do we do? Okay, we're going to go home. So
Yeah.
I think that having two locations is like 3 times more complicated than having one.
Yeah. And is part of that decision then like if you have the population to justify additional growth at the one location, doubling down on there, but if you're maybe in a town that's a little more rural and the only way to expand is I need to tap into another population center, is that part of the decision too,
Yeah.
potentially?
Yeah, definitely. If you're tapped out, if you're really getting, most of the market in a single town, then yeah, I think that a good thing to think about is, okay, what's the next town over where we could also like tap into a different population?
Yeah. In terms of consistency, I think again, people that don't have like the business pedigree, they're not necessarily thinking on the business side as much early on. I think people underestimate the challenge of a second and third location in terms of scalability and consistency. How do you make what we do at the first location consistently applied to the second and third location? So I don't know, like SOPs, certain training processes, how you hire. Any advice on that front?
Yeah, I mean, as a lawyer, my first advice to everyone is write it down. So, yeah, have SOPs, have detailed processes like how do we open this office? How should treatment room look? What color paint do we use in the bathroom? Um, how do we greet patients? So have all these different processes that you want to be consistent written down. And that's why a lot of franchises do quite well because they have all these standards and processes, which of course add to the initial cost, but at the same time, they are able to have a really consistent experience, which customers love.
Yeah, it's a playbook for the business.
Mhm.
It makes it as much copy and paste as it can be. Um, okay, cool. On that front, shifting gears a little bit, as you're building a team, whether it's at the one location or multiple locations, I think one of the things that we all know in the med spa space is people are very loyal to their provider. And it's hard for the business itself to generate loyalty when the loyalty lives with the provider in a lot of cases. So I guess my question would be, how do you think about retention when it comes to like people being loyal to specific team members? How do you go about comp structure? How did you think about like how to make your people happy so that we maintain a good team and keep the patients?
Yes. So that's a lot of different parts to that question. So the first is about the consumer. I think to encourage the consumer to try different providers, the way you could have your booking structured is option number one, the big option, book with first available, right? So make it easy for customers to book with various providers and then run different specials where it encourages people in a subtle way to try different providers so they become brand loyal and not as much provider loyal. Of course, they're going to be provider loyal, But there are like big companies, for example, a company called Peachy in New York, where it's super hard to book with a particular provider. It's much easier to just book like by appointment availability, and you don't even may not even know the name of your provider. So it also depends on your personal branding, right? Your marketing agency that you're working with should help you really select, like, do you want to have branding tied to providers or to your brand? And the more consistent and unique your brand is, the less provider dependent it'll be.
I like that. I'm thinking like you could almost do like a flash sale where like, a lot of people see provider A, but then the next week you're like, okay, let's try to get these people to cross over and use provider B some. It's like provider B has some availability this week. Flash sale, we're doing a 20% off to incentivize those people to go try provider B.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool. I think that's a really cool way. So getting these people to kind of work with different providers and think of it as a more interchangeable experience as opposed to just being really loyal to the one provider, obviously a really good strategy. When you talk about trying to create like loyalty to the brand itself, one of the things that I've seen people do that I think is really cool, and it kind of ties into the SOP angle, is they'll come up with some sort of like a protocol or standard treatment process that they communicate with the clients, so that if you're going to provider A, they're operating with the same framework as provider B. So that in a sense, you have a specific framework, philosophy, or treatment guideline that is blanketed across the entire organization. Do you see the value in that? Is that, you think, a good idea?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's really important in your protocols to write like how you do certain things, like how many units you would do maximum in somebody's forehead, or what your injection pattern for most types of faces is, depending on, how the person looks. So I think that, yeah, you want it to be super consistent and really not allow people to go off script, because this is a brand that you're building for your company, right? You're not trying to create 10 unique experiences for people. You want it to be consistent, because in the consistency, there'll be less mistakes, there'll be less lawsuits, and there'll actually be more customer satisfaction because there'll be less surprises.
Yeah, amazing. That's a great little clip. I can't wait to put that one in a short because I think that was rock solid. So like you need consistent protocols and treatment across providers, because if everybody's just freelancing, then you're increasing the risk that people are loyal to only the provider. And that we always talk about like hair salons. If you go to the person at the hair salon that you like the way they do your hair, you get a little uneasy going to a person in the next chair over that works in the same salon, because they kind of all have their own philosophy. But if you can build into your med spa that everybody's following the same protocol and you can communicate that to your clients, then people should hopefully feel like if that injector leaves and a new injector is there next week, then I'm still getting the same level of treatment, the same protocol, and the same strategy. So that's, I think, super important. I think a lot of even successful med spas overlook that, because they might have a few rock star injectors that have been around for a while and they've sort of been able to ride that wave. But any thoughts on, so obviously people are still going to be somewhat loyal to the provider. You can't escape that fully, but I think that diversifying that risk makes a ton of sense. In terms of like comp structure and how you incentivize your providers, especially injectors, to stay, any advice on that front?
Yeah, and we do a lot of work in this field as a law firm. A lot of our, especially bigger clients, really incentivizing injectors to stay for 5, 10 years, or to stay in case of a practice sale. So there are lots of different ways to do it. One is to implement some kind of retention bonus. That's the simplest way. So you would say, okay, if you stay for 1 year, or you get paid at the end of the year $5,000, in 2 years $10,000, in 3 years $20,000, and 5 years $30,000, right? You could also put in something that says if the practice is sold and you're still employed, you're going to get X payouts. So you could put something in place where, in case of a sale, people will get some kind of payout. So that could be something like phantom equity, where you're giving them, 3% or 5%, but you're not really making them an equity holder today. You're giving them a promise for the future. So that's another thing. Besides money, giving somebody a plan of how they're going to grow is a really good way to help retention. So even having different titles for people, like, junior injector, or not that you want to call anybody junior injector, because clients may not love going to them then, but
Internally.
yeah, some kind of plan for upgrading people's titles, upgrading their salaries, giving them more CME budget, giving them more opportunities to, travel to international conferences. So there are lots of not necessarily, salary increase things that you can give them, but I think retention bonuses and then incentivizing people in case of a sale are some of the things that we see a lot.
Yeah, I love that. I think we've talked a lot about this on the podcast. I don't think anybody's given that good of a specific guideline, right? A specific idea. A retention bonus, which is cash increasing at the end of every year retained, phantom stock upon a sale. So they kind of have it in their back of their head. Well, I don't want to miss the boat. If this place gets sold for a big amount of money, I've got this phantom stock sitting here. I'm going to miss that if I just decide to jump ship and go somewhere else. So you're kind of creating a little bit more of an anchor. I love that. Those are very specific, very actionable tips. Continuing education, making them feel like they're on a good growth path and you're supporting growth. Hey there, wanted to briefly interrupt the episode to make a quick ask. If you're a podcast listener, it would mean the world to us if you leave a review for the podcast, whether that's on iTunes or Spotify. It's something I hadn't really remembered or thought of asking for, but it does help us show up more frequently so that we can reach more people with the information that we're providing. So it would mean the world to us if you'd leave a review on iTunes or Spotify, if you're listening on audio. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you're in the loop for future videos and you don't miss any of the content that we're putting out. What about just culture and like how you treat people? Like any advice and tidbits on that front?
Yeah, I think this is a hard one, and it's a hard one to teach. My philosophy with people my whole life has been people are good and people want to do well and they want to take care of you and your business as much as they can within their ability. But it's up to you as a leader to find the right opportunities for them within your business and to help them become better and better. So if you lead with that kind of philosophy, I think it makes it better than if you're very distrusting of people or always trying to, save $5 on someone. So I think that one thing is to really deep down ask yourself, what is your philosophy on people? Do you believe people are overall good or people are overall, out to get you? Because I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think people are bad, somehow they become worse to you because maybe you're worse to them.
I feel like I've heard practice owners, this is so they have like that mindset or the other. And you'll see certain people where like I talk to them and like it seems like everybody that works for them is like terrible and screwing them. And like you said, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, I don't know, maybe you're kind of getting what you give here, and to some extent, are all these people really that bad? Or maybe you're not treating them the best and assuming bad intentions. So sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead. I know I
and
interrupted.
maybe they're not well matched to the role. Like I think sometimes we expect so much of people. Like we expect them to be salespeople, we expect them to be great injectors, we expect them to be, our friends. We expect them to cover for us in case we are sick. But we almost have to lower our expectations and be a little bit more realistic. And also recognize if we're going to become best friends with our team and our injectors, the expectations are going to change, right? When your friend calls you and they tell you that they're sick or they're have some personal problems going on, you're going to console them and be very compassionate to them. You're not going to say, "Oh, well, I understand, but please keep coming to work. That's our policy." So it's much harder to enforce policies with friends. So you could believe everyone is good and has potential to be good, but don't make them your best friend. We have a client who was throwing a birthday party for one of their injectors, right? Which is very nice. I appreciate that. But then the injector resigned and went to work for a competitor, and the birthday party was still scheduled. So what do you do then? And it was a big party. So I think you have to be careful with things like that. Like you want to be very professional with your team, very consistent with your team, expect them to do great and keep asking them like this very scary question, but I think is very worthwhile. What can I do better to make your job here easier and more fulfilling for you?
Yeah. So you can be compassionate, you can be caring, you can be there to support your team, but it is probably advised to draw the line between like, this person's my best friend, we're going out to dinner and hanging out and having drinks every night. Because that can definitely be dangerous in terms of your ability to enforce standards and things of that nature.
Yeah, and nothing good happens after you have a few drinks.
True too.
Like as on the legal side, right? I've done so many settlements of we had a corporate event and, somebody touched someone and now there's a discrimination case and there's a harassment case and the person was my best friend, but now they want, 25,000. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm too scared to go to drinking
Yeah.
events with people.
Yeah. Yeah. So compassionate, kind, but perhaps it's wise to draw a boundary.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't switch gears and talk about this, because this is something that comes up all the time, and I reference it in our first episode that we did going back 2022, 3 years ago. And it's the idea of discounting and price. And this is something I'm really passionate about because it comes up a lot in conversations that I have with practice owners. And I think there are a lot of consultants and a lot of people in the space that's, in my opinion, they say what people want to hear, which is don't discount, it cheapens your brand, don't run deals, you're attracting the wrong people. Practice owners hear that and they go, yeah, I don't want to have to discount. That sounds I want to do that. That sounds way better. And the reality in our experience is what you're missing is the reality of the math. When you make it more attractive for people to do business with you and to give you a shot, especially on that first visit, you lower your customer acquisition cost, you give yourself more at bats, and you lend itself to being able to build perception through experience, right? People are going to feel good about doing business with you because they know you, like you, and trust you based on firsthand experience. I know on our first episode, you talked about this a little bit, but could you just, in MedSpa Confidential, you touch on it. You talked about Groupon and originally in your practice. Could you talk about kind of just your views on discounting and your philosophy around pricing strategy?
Yeah. And I think discounting definitely works, and discounting is definitely a very effective tool to attract new clients. I will argue with whoever I need to argue with to prove that point, but I think the data speaks for itself. So I think that the statistics we spoke about when we first spoke was we were trying to figure out at our med spa, we had thousands of clients, and who to send handwritten cards to for the holidays. And we just didn't have the bandwidth for me and 5 other people to sign cards to everyone. So we said, who are our top 20% highest spending clients and where did they come from? Since we're going to look for who they are, we might as well track where they came from. And about 80% of the top 20% of our clients, many of whom spent 10, 20, 25,000, came from Groupon. So I saw the data firsthand. It's not made up. It's not a small sample size. It's thousands of people. And so I think that these discounting sites and methods still work. Of course, it has to be part of a bigger strategy, right? You don't want to discount every single client, but to acquire new customers, to get market share, I think you absolutely have to discount. Or you could be content with just being a business based on referral, and you may grow, but you may grow at 5% per year, whereas your competitor 1 mile away who's doing a new client special may grow at 100% per year. So it just depends what you want.
I 100% agree. And it's basic consumer psychology. As you dial up the attractiveness of your offer, you're going to get a better response rate and lower customer acquisition costs from your advertising. We see the same thing. Like when we're running ads on Facebook, Instagram, Google, we'll run a promo or a discount. And you look at the data and you start to pool it after a year, and you have all these customers that came in from a discount that are now big spenders. And I think one of the things that I see is people get caught up in the anecdotes and the perception, and they tend to maybe like put the data as a secondary metric. So they'll have experiences where like those customers come in from Groupon, and I'm sure you experienced this. You have some of them that were just there for the deal, and they're going to leave next month and they're going to go somewhere else, or they were a little annoying and they were haggling you on price. And I think the reality is you have this net that you're casting. Some of those people are going to come in, but the question is, in absolute volume, how many of the good patients are left? And if you want your business to succeed at the highest rate in terms of like finances and growth and patient acquisition, I think the data points there as well. Like, again, I 100% agree with you. But anything to say to the people that do get caught up on the anecdotal examples of like, oh, that one patient that came from Groupon this week was a real pain in the butt. I don't want to run Groupon anymore.
Yeah, I think in any business, right, there are going to be some patients who are a pain in the butt. That's part of it, part of being in business, right? Otherwise, like there wouldn't be money to be made in the business. Otherwise, maybe they would be paying you and you would be paying them and you'd be friends, but this isn't that. I think in business, you have to expect and be prepared for some patients, no matter where they come from, whether they come from Groupon or whether they're your best friend's mother, are going to be extremely difficult. And you, as a leader, have to develop thicker skin and procedures in place to deal with difficult people. So, of course, we will all be sometimes disappointed where, we spend an hour with someone, we recommend the greatest treatment plan to them, and then they just say, no, well, my last injector did 20 units on my whole face and it was frozen. And if you don't do that to me, I'm going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
Um, but that's just part of, some patients are like that. And some clients are like that in any industry, right? In law, sometimes I have clients who have unrealistic expectations, and I do my best not to get offended by what they're stating to me, but to be compassionate and understand, like, maybe they weren't properly informed before, or maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe they have this skewed view of lawyers, whatever it is. Um, at the same time, just realize 80% of your income is going to come from your top 20% of clients. So you don't need to, if you get some clients who really took advantage of you, good for them. Great. They got a great deal on Botox.
Yeah.
The world will go on. It's okay. Like, sometimes you give people a little more than what they deserve, but it kind of all evens out at the end.
Yeah, I think people do get caught up on that, but I agree with you. You can make the decision then, if I don't want my practice to be in the best financial position, and growth is not necessarily like my number one priority, you can make the decision of like, no, I just want to spend my week dealing with customers that are coming in because they chose me based on my reputation alone, and I know they're not here for the discount. But the reality is you're going to see less patients. And if you're okay with that, fine, but at least know that's the decision you're making. I think I get frustrated sometimes when I hear like there's so much in terms of like advertising and so many consultants in the space just saying like never discount, never run a promo. And we have the same thing as a marketing agency. I have the data to show that these strategies, even though only 50% of the clients might be clients that are retained and stick around, it's still financially much more lucrative because you're increasing your response rate and you're getting a much larger number of at bats than if you were just trying to win on reputation alone. And it's a hard industry to win on reputation alone when you're trying to attract that first visit. I always use, we're in a suburb of Nashville, and there are two med spas on the main street that are right across from the street from each other, and they're both beautiful. One of them is a brand new white Southern style house with a wraparound porch. The other is this brick and black building with the business logo in cursive. They have standalone buildings, beautiful offices, amazing Instagram profiles, great Google reviews, beautiful websites. And ultimately, if you're looking at like the data that you have available and you're trying to figure out where to go, and one of those practices goes, hey, we'll give you an awesome deal on a promo to try us out for Botox for the first time, that's going to tip the scales in their favor more often than not. And they're going to get those at-bats. And that means they have the chance to create perception through experience. So I could not agree more. I'm glad we were able to touch on that. Any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think right now that's easier to do than ever because there are all these newer Botox-like brands where some people may say, well, I can't do that with Botox, right? Because it's costing me $7 a unit. Can't possibly sell it for 10. Okay, but now there are lots of other botulinum toxins that maybe you could buy for $4 or $5 a unit. So this is the time to try the promos that you haven't tried. I have no incentive to promote this. I'm just telling you, right? Like what I've seen work time and time again.
Yeah, same. Like even us as marketing consultants, it's like, I just want to do what's best for you. But when I look at the numbers, this is what we see over and over again generally works best. I don't have any sort of like marriage to the concept either. We both also talked about in both of our businesses, we kind of put our money where our mouth is. You said there are certain people that are lawyers that are like, oh, I'll never do a consultation for free. I'm not giving you my time for free. And you talked about, well, the advantage is I get that at bat and I get the opportunity to develop the relationship and show my value. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like how you even do that in your business?
Yeah. So in my business, we make it super easy. You can go right on our website and schedule a 15-minute free consultation. It should take you no more than 2 minutes. And a lot of my peers who are lawyers say, well, why would you do that? You're giving away a lot of your time for free. And a lot of clients try to keep me on the phone for way more than those initial 15 minutes. But I think that it's a great way for people to meet me, for me to meet them, and to really introduce them to our firm and what we do. And yes, it's a tremendous use of my time, meaning like it takes a lot of my day. I'm not really getting any revenue from that on day one, but a lot of people sign up. So I think having free consultations in service businesses really makes sense. And you don't want it to be like, oh, in order to get a free consultation, you have to fill out this 10-page form, or you have to, sign up for something else. Like, I think really making it free makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. This episode is brought to you by MedSpa Magic Marketing, my agency. We help med spas and aesthetics practices grow with more effective marketing strategies. And I know that's a vague phrase, right? That's a vague claim. So I have an offer for you. I offer this to any new prospects. If you're interested in exploring another marketing option, a new agency, or just getting into Facebook, Instagram, Google Ads for the first time, I'd love to show you why we're different, what we're doing for clients. And we can do that via a 1.5 hour planning session where I'll outline a specific marketing plan and I'll give you all of the blueprints that we would implement if we were to do business together. Now you can take that, use that on your own, hire someone else to help you execute it, or work with us. We really don't hold anything back on that strategy call. And I think you'll have a lot of confidence in how you manage your marketing investment moving forward, understanding some of the nuances that can help you implement more effective marketing strategies for your business. So if you want to do that, you can go to medspamagicmarketing.com. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk to you as an attorney and ask about GLP-1s. So
Yeah,
what is going on with GLP-1s? I've been trying to keep up with the news and I'm super confused. So what is the latest and what's going on there as we speak in the end of May 2025 here?
Yeah, so yesterday, May 22nd, 2025, was the deadline for semaglutide compounding. And what that means, and it's not a gray area, by the way. People are saying like, well, I can still do it because of this or that, which I'll talk about, but it's black and white. After May 22nd, compounded semaglutide cannot be produced unless the patient has a special need for this compounded dose that's well documented. So what does that mean? It means, let's say you have 100 patients. You can't legally have a real basis for putting all 100 of them on the compounded version. Even if you documented in your patient file that they needed this microdose or they needed this intermediate dose or you needed to mix it with B12, I think that if there was an issue and you got sued, it would be very hard to prove that you were really not committing fraud when you did that. So as of today, what I would suggest is changing your weight loss programs where a majority of your clients are going to be directed to Eli Lilly Direct or one of the other places, but you're still charging them a fee for weight loss management and you bundle some other things into your weight loss program. You could still have some portion of your clients be on the compounded version if they truly medically need it, but there isn't any like gray area. And there have been lots of lawsuits. Like we are representing a couple of clients where they got a few cease and desist letters from Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk. They ignored them. And now the company has filed complaints against them. So it's not like these companies are going away. They spent billions of dollars developing these drugs. They have a patent and they tried to, these Compounding Pharmacy Association tried to fight this in federal court, but the judge did not agree with them. So I know that there are some compounding pharmacies that are still fighting and are still telling their clients, everything is fine, you can order from us. But I would challenge you to say, okay, if your compounding pharmacy is telling you that, write back to them in writing and say, okay, so if I get sued, you're going to defend me, right? Or you're going to help pay for my legal costs, and see what they say.
Yeah. If you had to ballpark it right now, which percentage of the compounding pharmacies are still doing this and they're kind of brushing it off saying like, it'll get sorted out in the courts? Is it still under appeal? Is it still open to appeal or is it settled?
It's open to appeal, but the standard for appeal is super hard to meet. So the judge would have had to make a mistake essentially for the original decision to get overturned. So it's up to appeal, but the regulatory framework is very clear. If there's no shortage, compounded versions should not be made unless there's, this very strict medical need. So here, I don't think that there's a lot for these compounding pharmacies to stand on. But at the same time, if let's say I'm a compounding pharmacy and 90% of my revenue is from GLP-1s, what am I going to do? I have two choices. I could shut my doors or I could continue fighting. And so that's what the compounding pharmacies are doing. But that doesn't protect you as the practice buying from them, because as soon as they settle, as soon as they give their clinic list to the big pharmaceutical companies that are suing them, you're going to be on their radar.
Yeah. What if you had to ballpark the percentage of compounding pharmacies that are just kind of like closing their eyes and hoping this is going away? Is it like most of them are doing that right
Yeah,
now?
I would say out of the big ones, I would say probably 50% are doing
Okay.
that. A lot of them have very long shipping delays right now. So they're not
Yeah.
shipping new things. They're still taking orders. They're taking people's money, but they're not shipping, which is also like a strange
Yeah.
situation.
Interesting. Okay. So if this is still even hypothetically open to appeal, and there's this gap in between, if you were violating the law during the gap before an appeal went through, are you still subject to penalty?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not what's interesting about this. It's not the FDA that's really going after practices for this, whereas it's really only the FDA that would have the capacity to do it. Meaning legally, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk could go after practices for violating their patent for let's say selling compounded versions of drugs where they were marketing the brand name ones. But what these pharmaceutical companies are doing, even though they legally may not be in the right, they are filing complaints anyway and letting people defend them. So what they're saying, what they're trying to do is essentially outspend the little practices. So here, they're not really in the right. But if you get a $100,000 lawsuit from Eli Lilly or Novo Nordisk, can you afford to pay it?
Yeah. So the advice then is you can continue your weight loss program, but just prescribe the brand name products. And yes, it's going to be more expensive for your customers. And that's the reality of the situation that we're in.
Yeah, if you want to be
Yeah.
legally compliant and sleep at night, yes.
And
Or if you want to, be
yeah.
more kind of on your own and just know that there's this legal risk and maybe you're okay with it, you can take that risk. But just know that it's not risk free right now.
Yeah. And I'm the kind of person that, like, if there's any risk there, I'm not touching it. But I know I'm always interested in, like, okay, this is the black and white version of the rule book. I'm the kind of person that I'm just going to go by the black and white version of the rule book. I'm sort of curious for like our listeners that are listening to this. And I bet you they're thinking the same thing of all the other practice owners. Okay, but am I going to be the one sucker that follows the playbook at the expense of my business? And now everybody else is going to go like do whatever they want to do. And at the end of the day, this is going to get sorted out. And they're going to get away with it. Any insights there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we as a firm probably talk to 100 people a week right now about this very issue. I think it just depends on somebody's risk tolerance. So, yes, there are going to be practices that are violating this. Some of them are going to get sued, not all of them. Maybe that's going to be you, maybe that's not going to be you. It just depends on how tolerant you are. In America, people can file a lawsuit for anything. So you don't have to have a good case to file a lawsuit. You just have to have the funds and the willingness. These pharmaceutical companies have the funds and the willingness. It's just going to be up to you of how much you have mental energy and financial to fight them. And
Yeah.
they're not going to go after everyone, but I think they are going to go after a lot because they forecast these drugs to be their biggest blockbuster drugs of all time.
Yeah. How long are the patents in effect? When does it become eligible for compounding again?
I
Years
think
and years out?
in 2035 or something like
Oh,
that
so it's
for a long.
pretty long ways out until that's the case.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. I think that's great advice. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm the buy the book person. I think it makes sense to play it safe unless something changes. And there's another. Do you anticipate that anything changes, or do you anticipate this probably is going to lock in? These patents are going to be protected, and if you want these drugs for the next 10 years, you're going to be buying them under the brand name.
Yeah, I don't think anything big is going to change because if that changes, then all these big pharmaceutical companies are going to rebel and say, well, then it's not worth it for us to spend $5 billion
Yeah.
developing a drug. If you're not going to protect our patents, then we're just not going to do drug development and not market our drugs in the US and go to these other, big markets like China, India. So
Yeah.
I think that the chance of something changing is small. At the same time, these drugs are very popular. They could go on shortage again, but we don't know until that happens.
With the variation compound, so people trying to just go like, well, I'm just going to throw B12 on it and we're going to call it like a different, that now I can go back to like a compounded version. And you said that like you really actually have to have a good medical reason. And most of the time people are going to be trying to do that. They're really stretching. It sounds like there's going to be cases where maybe it makes sense. But for the most part, if you try to go that route, you're just bending the law. Your recommendation, again, I'm assuming, is to avoid doing that.
Yes, it's not a gray area. Like, just taking a compounded version of something and mixing something else to it does not make it okay if it's not on the shortage list.
Yeah. Sara, where can people learn more about you and what your practice does for med spas? What type of services do you all typically provide med spas, and where can people learn more about you and Lengea Law?
Yeah, so what we do is we help people form med spas. We help people hire employees. We do MSOs and MSAs in like the states where, for example, if an RN wants to open a practice in New York or in California or in Texas. So we do lots of new practice formations. We do employment. We help people get investors. We help people sell their practice, and we do compliance audits. So if someone just has an existing practice, we would take a look and see like what's compliant, what's not, what are the risks. And then we do one-off, like, for example, we do 1-hour consultations about GLP-1s or some other topic, anything. So,
oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can use it kind of like on an as needed basis as well.
Yeah. So we have membership programs for someone who wants something a little more comprehensive. And then we have as needed, like 1-hour one-offs. If you want to talk to me about anything or one of our team members, we do that too. And on our website is lengealaw.com. Right on our website, you could schedule a free consultation. And you could also find us on all the social media, including TikTok.
Yep. And for those of you listening, it's LENGEA law.com. Firm is rated 5 stars on Google. I'm looking now with over 160 client reviews. So I know you do an amazing job for your clients. We'll make sure that all of those links are in the show notes. And please, if you haven't already, no matter what stage you're at in your med spa, also go buy the book, Med Spa Confidential. It's one of my top recommended reading list items for med spa owners. I mention it all the time. So we'll make sure that the book is also linked in the show notes along with some of the social media channels.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Sara. We appreciate having you on. We'll have to make this at least an annual thing.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. This podcast is a production of Med Spa Magic Marketing. If your med spa or aesthetic practice is in need of digital marketing services, help with advertising on Facebook, Instagram, Google, lead generation, and booking more appointments, please visit medspamagicmarketing.com.